Hi, my name is Jay Clark. I'm an AI/ML specialist at AWS. In this video, I'm going to take you quickly through deploying a Strands agent using Amazon Bedrock AgentCore or AgentCore Runtime specific. So about a month ago now, we released I would say a suite of tools around hosting and managing your agents or others' agents. And I've been playing around a little bit with AgentCore Runtime as well as the other features. And so wanted to run through a quick example of using it. I think one thing to note maybe beforehand is that we've released essentially 5 different services, but all in the Agent Core moniker because they all help you deploy your agents. So Agent Core Runtime is around essentially the infrastructure to host your agent, but the others would be for things that similarly useful. So Agent Core Memory is around context management and having long-term, short-term context or memory controlled for your agent. Agent Core tools are, I think you could imagine, tools that are available for your agents to use. So that would be things like code interpretation or browser search. And then we have Agent Core observability, which is around insights or getting insights from your logs. We have Agent Core identity, which is around managing, I'll say permissions, but role access at a fine grained level across your agents, but also across your tools. And then Agent Core Gateway is a really useful one that's around if you already have APIs, if you have Lambda functions, for example, sort of making those available to your agent as MCP servers. So essentially, you don't have to create the MCP server in that case. You can essentially leverage those services and Gateway and then turn them into MCP servers. So this one, I'm just going to focus on runtime. I might do some for the others, but I'll just take you through this notebook. And I will take you to the cells, but let me just get this running first. But I think the key pieces, and I'll talk a little bit more about the use case, but that's not the main piece here, is there are 2 packages that we're going to install. So the Agent Core Starter Toolkit, that'll have some useful constructs in it. And then we have just the main Bedrock Agent Core package. And the imports we have here don't matter too much. Photo 3 is what we're going to use when we actually create the Agent Core client. JSON, OS, I could probably even remove the sys and OS pieces. And then from the toolkit, we're pulling in the runtime class. Standard configurations. So we need to run this in a region, obviously. And we also need an agent name. And so I'm being a bit overly verbose, but use your name as you see fit. And then we're instantiating the runtime. And then again, we're creating that Agent Core client using Boto. And so in order to actually use runtime, we essentially just need 2 things. Well, one thing and one possible. The possible piece is your requirements. So any packages that you need installed on your sort of runtime container, your runtime VM, you want to place here. So obviously we have Strands because we're going to use a stranded agent. We have Agent Core because we're using Agent Core, in Boto 3 and UV there. Then we actually have our agent file. So with Strands in particular, and it's similar with the other frameworks, essentially to create a Strands agent, you need sort of 2.5, 4 things. You need the model that you're going to use. So we'll select that, and that'll be Claude in this case. I think 3.7, but one day I'll update to 4. You need your system prompt if you're going to have a system prompt. You need your tools, and then we'll wrap it all together, right? So first, maybe let me explain a little bit about the use case or give you the 20-second pitch. If you've ever had to try and find and schedule an appointment with a medical provider, I'm sure you understand sort of the pain of doing that, right? So you may go to your insurance provider and they may have a search that works somewhat well. You may go to Google and attempt to do a search. If you're fortunate enough to be able to do it through an app, the user experience is better, but you also still need to sort of know what it is that you're looking for and what you're looking to do. Wouldn't it be great if we could essentially just have a conversation with an agent, LLM, doesn't really matter, and then they come up with recommendations for who you could see and who's available, and they handle the scheduling. So that's the provider search agent that we I built with Strands, and we're going to then host that using AgentCore Runtime. So what do we need? We need our Strands agent, daytime for some fun stuff. The AgentCore app is what we're going to use to then set our entry point, right? And we're just in there. Now, normally when I build agents, I generally like to keep my tool definition separate from the actual agent structure, the agent flow. In this case, a feature hopefully that they will add that's not included here is the ability to just upload additional artifacts. So that might be additional code like this custom tools piece here, but it might be other maybe you have a model artifact that you also want to. Now there are some ways around this, but probably the simplest one is just to dump all of the functions that I had in my custom tools into the actual agent script. So it turns it into a longer script, but it's at least it's the least overhead, I guess I'll say, in implementing. And so I have a number of things here. So this is a provider search agent. I wanted this to sort of simulate real life. So it does reach out to various data sources. So that would be things like DynamoDB, reaches out to S3, can reach out to Athena. And so I just need tools that allow it to do that effectively, right? So there's a check provider availability. There are schedule appointment, as you might imagine. Oh, I think I have them listed here. Yeah, we can query Athena. We can get schemas from DynamoDB. We can filter Dynamo tables. We can get Athena column info, so schema info there as well. We can check our provider's availability, schedule an appointment, cancel an appointment, get the patient appointment, and get the provider schedule. So the bare essentials of the things you might want your provider scheduling or provider search agent to be able to do. And so we have all that listed here. I'll skip most of those functions. I also make sure this code is available in the description, probably on GitHub somewhere. But if we scroll down far enough, here we go. We actually get past all the function definitions, and then we're just defining the list of tools that we want available. Again, the same list we had above. This was more when I was testing, but just the models that we can leverage. I'll be using Claude here. That's where I set my model ID. I use the current date in the system prompt, but here's the system prompt, and the normal things you might imagine. Your MetMingle, medical search assistant. Sorry, that makes me laugh every time. But remain courteous and professional. Check database schemas. Verify customer identity, etc., etc. All the normal stuff. I have my corner cases, the provider table information. So it might be the physician's table that has the demographics. It's the clinical table that has the provider specialty information. The practice infos and DynamoDB. Right, just has the practice info and patient tables, appointment tables, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, I didn't even add the example interactions. I should probably do that. But once we have the tools defined, we have the system prompt defined, we have the model that we want to use, we just wrap them in agent, and that's how you instantiate an agent with Strands. And finally, we just need to create an endpoint. And so here's how we create our endpoint. We're using the function invoke, but that's not super important, and also payload, which you essentially define, but it'll be JSON or a dictionary. And then you also have the option of having context here if you want to leverage that. We won't need that here, but it's something worth knowing. But effectively, we'll just get the prompt. That's a field that I'll define, and I'll show you how this looks in the console, but also show the code for it. And then we call our agent. And then also return the text generated. So this is essentially our app.py we're going to use, and we've written that out. And now we're ready to actually do some stuff with AgentCore. Oh, I don't need to create a role here anymore because I'm going to get to do that for free. So I'll just delete that. Then now let me run the rest. Okay. It's too far. There we go. So now we need to configure things, and the configuration is fairly straightforward as well. If you're familiar with SageMaker jobs, They have a sort of similar feel where essentially you're just setting the infrastructure that you want to run, and then you provide your code, and it just goes about and deals with it. So here's something similar. So we set our entry point, essentially the code that we want to run, or our app.py, and then from there we have a number of other. And so here's where I could set the execution role when I was creating one, but I'm now going to use the auto create execution role, and so that's why that above is failed. So we don't need that. I'm also going to auto create the container. So essentially we have the requirements. AgentCore or the runtime can have a Docker file created, your image created, and it'll be hosted on ECR. And so we're going to auto do that. We have a requirements file, so we're going to add that in. We have our region, which we defined above, and then our agent name that we defined above. And printing out the response is just to say that we actually got it. So there are a number of status pieces that you get. One comment on this: anytime now that I see icons or emojis in printed text from code, I just automatically assume that it was LLM generated. I don't know that it was here, but it feels like it was. Although not making a value judgment on any of that, just a thing to note. And then we have our config result. That's just all the, spitting out all the stuff that we had before. And now we're ready to launch. And I was hoping this would have been done, but I ran into that error. But essentially, it'll give us a whole bunch of information. It's setting up a code build. It's going through the process of creating the image, hosting it in ECR. It's creating the runtime portion and then hosting that. And I'll show what that looks like in the console. Repository doesn't exist. Creating new ECR repository. Great. All this stuff queued. Provisioning, build, post build completed. So I think, oh, okay, so we are done. So we completed this. We can now, oh, and I'll need to change the ARN. Right, so now we can test it, but before that, I actually want to jump over to the console and just show what that looks like. And okay, if you weren't here, if you type in AgentCore, there's an AgentCore service. But on the left-hand side, we have our runtime that we're going to use. And here you see the built-in tools, gateways, memory, identity, all the other features that I mentioned above. But we have our agent. And so here's the one that I made previously. But again, we named our agent verbosely the AgentCore Strands Provider Search Demo Agent. And so it's ready. We can click on it, get some useful information. Here's how we can use it in Python, TypeScript, JavaScript, etc. And you're given a default endpoint. So you can version this. So if you make updates at any point, you can version it and you can create endpoints. And an endpoint just contains a version, right? So you'll always have the default. And so default's like your draft endpoint essentially. But if you wanted to create another endpoint, V1, etc., you can give a description and then you associate it with a version, create that endpoint, and I'll just let that go. But you can also test your endpoints. So if I click on default, it gives me some information, but then we can also test it. And I think the major thing here is, remember that entry point that we defined in our app.py? We can essentially just create a JSON that we want to pass in. I think yes. And this will just be hello, I think, is our version of hello world. Then we can run this and there should be no issue, hopefully, ideally. But, oh, okay, yep. And then we got a response back, and these are some of the instructions that I had. But welcome to MedMingle. Hello, I'm MedMingle, your medical search provider, etc., etc. Here to help you. All the fun stuff there. And so now we sort of tested in the console. You can do a lot of other tests or more advanced tests in the console. But that was enough just to say that our agent is up. It's running. We can connect to it. Now, one thing that I will need for us to test it using the API is the ARN. Right? And so just when you're invoking the runtime, so you have the runtime ARN, that's what I have here, and I'll copy this. and paste it in. And then you also have the qualifier. The qualifier is just the endpoint name. So again, it would be default if we wanted to use the default one, but we just created one that was our version 1. And then we have the payload. And so let's try the default one just because I think I have that one listed here. But we have our prompt. Who are the top 3 doctors in Washington for physical? I'll give my information after I see the doctors available, please. We dump that as a string. And now we can run the next things. Let me just replace the run. Set this to true. My version of run don't run. But there's one thing that's missing here, or a couple of pieces that are missing. So we auto created our execution role. And the execution role is just for the things required to run your agent or agent core. So be things like ECR, agent core, Bedrock, etc. But what it doesn't include are all of the requirements that we need for our tools. And these tools reach out to Dynamo, it reaches out to Athena, it reaches out to S3, and we need those permissions attached. And they're not attached by default. So it doesn't sort of read what's happening inside your code and then come up with those pieces. So we're going to need to add them ourselves. So I'm going to jump over into IAM. Go to the roles. I should have had an AgentCore role created. Here we go. This is our AgentCore SDK runtime. This is the role that was created for us. And it just has the runtime execution policy, but we'll need more. And so we'll need to add in Dynamo. DynamoDB. I think do we create anything with Dynamo? I think we do. So, okay. And you shouldn't do this. Only use the minimum required permissions and all the other fun stuff. I'll just add this to make sure it works. Oh, and I should have added the others. I think I just need Athena as well as S3. And I think, actually, I don't think I need S3. I don't think it's reaching S3 directly. So let's add that permission. Looks good to me. So we have a runtime, we have Dynamo access, we have Athena access. And so now we should be able to run this and get the top 3 doctors in Washington. So let's see. Sometimes it's a bit finicky. Oh, let's see. Let's see what happens. And if this takes too long, then I may sort of pause the recording and then come back. Okay. All right. So we're back. A couple of things happened in the time. It did run. It did turn back an error. The long story short, I didn't have all the permissions needed, so S3 was required. But once that was figured out, things ran the way they're supposed to. I did change this from the default to the endpoint at some point just to try and figure out what was going on. We have our response. We received a status code 200. That's great. And then I was also able to simplify the JSON decode. So here now we just get the response, we read it, and we have our response. So the top doctors in Washington for physical examinations based on my search, blah, blah, blah. I found several doctors in Washington State, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. Emily Chin, internal medicine, and down the list. I think there were 2 others if I could find the name, but I cannot. Internal medicine. Oh, and we stopped the. Well, yeah, we limited the number of tokens we generate out. But with all that said, we get a list of folks, although I think this is just one person in Washington. And there you have it. And so now we're done, right? And so you can make updates either to configuration, to the versions, all of that good stuff. And with that, we now have our agent in production, and we can also do the same thing here. We wanted, just to make sure, actually I won't because I'm looking at the time, but with that, you now have your agent.